Okay. I just want to go over a couple things with your clickers. And can I borrow one of the clickers here in front? Okay, great. Okay, there will be a few, this is an interactive presentation, so there will be a few questions here. I won't keep track of your score or anything, so I won't report to your bosses what you got a grade on in the ethics class here. Basically, you're just going to need 1 through 4 on the digits here. And I'll tell you when. There'll be a little 10-second clock when we come to the question section. And just click your choice once, and then we'll see the bar graph afterwards. And then we have a box in the back. So at the end, if everyone can just leave their clicker in the box, or else we'll have to hunt you down, and that might be a little embarrassing. So, okay. Here you go. Okay. So I had a couple questions already, and I just want to talk about, I'm the ethics officer at the airport. We also, and I know some of the cities here, folks from San Jose, San Francisco, San Diego, also have city ethics commissions. I'm not part of that commission. I'm a separate entity, although we work a lot with our city ethics commission. The airport is one of 3 proprietary departments for the city of Los Angeles. And as that, we are a quasi-authority. Our revenue is all derived from our own business enterprises, and we have a board that approves contracts for us. So we do go to the council for larger contracts, but most of the daily interactions are done by board's approval. The ethics office is about 5 years old. It was started by our board, which had a lot of business persons on it who had experience with the corporate sector ethics and compliance world. For many of you probably recognize the Enron and Tyco and WorldCom scandals of the early 2001. Much federal regulation coming out of that, including Sarbanes-Oxley on one side for internal auditors, and on the criminal justice side, Department of Justice, the federal sentencing guidelines. They both talk about enhancing the role of both internal auditors and an ethics office. So any publicly held corporation is required by law to have an ethics office, to have their own code of ethics, ethics training, and to have greater transparency to the upper echelons of the corporation. So we have an office that's similar to that. Basically what I do is I have a helpline for people to call in about issues of gifts, travel, honoraria, things like that. We do trainings as well. And if there's any questions about misconduct, both from external or internal stakeholders, they can call my office as well. And I work with various divisions within my department to resolve those issues. So that's a little background about what I do and where I come from here. I'm going to just turn this away so I don't have a double microphone noise going on. Okay. So I want to, as an ethics person, I always find it, these larger national ethics issues are always kind of fascinating. And we had both the mortgage crisis, our economy collapsing, and then the return of Gordon Gekko. And I think what Gordon Gekko really wanted to say is government is good, right? And government is good for a number of reasons. But sometimes we're not always clear on that. And if we look at places like Egypt or Tunisia or Jordan right now, we'd say, I'm not so sure government is good. And when government gains its legitimacy only by the point of a gun, then it has no true moral authority. Okay? So it's only when we have the consent of the governed that a government has true moral authority. And so what does this mean for us as public employees and government workers? Well, we are endowed with a trust. We're endowed with the public trust. And we have an obligation to uphold that trust for the consent of the governed. So when issues come up that diminish that public trust, we need to both resolve them and try to ensure that they don't continue. Okay. So these are a few examples of things that have been recently in the news. Of course, the city of Bell, which I think we can all get some traction on for probably the next several years. people are taking, egregious salaries in a city that doesn't have that kind of money. Issue in New York, some crane inspectors who are taking money basically to give A's on tests to people who never took the crane inspection test. Okay? That also followed by a number of crane accidents that were somewhat related to that. Okay? In Los Angeles, we had a fire inspector who was found soliciting home health care departments, agencies, for money to give them clearance on the number of beds they could have in their facilities. Okay? Issues like that diminish the public trust, the trust that we've been given to do our jobs. Okay, so I'm going to go very briefly through trust, the issue of trust, and then talk about ethics, go through ethics and compliance and differences between that, and then move into different types of ethical dilemmas, and then we have some case studies as well. So when we talk about trust, we all say, okay, in God we trust this, we trust that. Well, what does that mean by trust? Well, in one way, just a very simple definition is we follow through on our commitments. We make promises, and we follow through on them. And if we're unable to follow through on that promise, we let the person know why, or we explain why it is we cannot follow through. Okay? It's commitment, promise keeping. Okay, when we talk about the public trust, it's about our performance. It's about our performance to ensure that what we do, the resources that we manage on behalf of the public, are done well, effectively, and efficaciously. Asymmetrical. Thomas Jefferson said that public service is a public trust, and there is an asymmetrical power balance between the governed and those who have the power of the government. Okay? In other words, those of us who are in government positions, we make rules and regulations about how much hazardous waste can be tolerated at manufacturing plants, how much pollution is acceptable in the water. We make these decisions on behalf of all the people. Okay? It's an asymmetrical power relationship. And therefore, because it's an asymmetrical power relationship, we have this inherent responsibility to be trustworthy with our actions. Okay. So why ethics? Why am I here? Okay. This is why. We're talking about ethics. If I asked everyone here their definition of ethics, I'd probably get about 25 different answers. Okay, it's the rules, the law. It's based on my religious upbringing. It is what it is, depending on what day of the week it is. Okay. I refer back, because I have a philosophy background. I refer many things back to the Greeks, and the Greek notion of ethics, it's a secular one, but it infuses all their other notions of ethics, is one of human flourishing. Okay? So it's not, you're not guilty, you're not wrong, human flourishing. Okay? That is, we make the right decisions, and when we make the right decisions, we lead a happier life. Okay? So it's kind of a nice positive spin on ethics. Okay? Human flourishing. The corollary to that is do no harm. And we have ethical actions from the smallest of things, how much you feed your cat in the morning, to the largest of things of, is this environmentally safe? Is this okay for people? Are these waters okay for people to swim in? Okay? So doing no harm. And the flip side is promoting the good, promoting good action. Okay? So we take the words blame and guilt out of this, and we focus on doing no harm and doing good action. We have a better definition of ethics. Okay, and it's reflective and deliberate. One of the things that we do at the airport, we have a new employee orientation that we have a little ethics case cards and an ethics map, and everyone has to go through this, and we make sure that they have a discussion on the cases. Because it's only by discussing it with each other do you get a better perspective of what she's thinking, what's he thinking, and they bring other things to the table that are necessary to make the best decision. Okay, so we've called deliberative and reasoned issues as well. Okay, so compliance, we all have compliance laws and regulations we have to deal with, and they're necessary. Right? They're necessary to have some conformity, and they're necessary to have some standard of behavior as well. But as I'm sure you know, that having compliance alone doesn't mean that everyone follows those regulations, or that those regulations are always appropriate for every single circumstance. So how does ethics support this? Well, compliance is kind of a bad. We have these rules, right? Ethics is more of a how. How do we enforce these rules? How do we make sure that they're equitable? How do we make sure that the rule is implemented fairly in different counties and different socioeconomic regions? Okay. This is kind of a little breakdown. It's a little bit of a larger stereotype. Obviously, we can pull some of these columns around. But generally, we have compliance. We have laws. Legislators pass laws. We're implementing them. How do we measure if the laws are being followed? We have inspections, we have penalties, we have trainings. We certify people. Okay. Decision making is minimized because it's one law. We're all doing the same thing. Communication is downward, following the laws. Now, on the ethics side, we do somewhat of the opposite. We're measuring how these laws are being put across. We focus on a value-based perspective. Are we being honest? Are we being truthful? Are we doing it with integrity? Customer service. How many of us focus on customer service? Transparency, communication. These are all important elements to ensuring that the people, with consent of the government, knows what we're doing. Okay? Decision making is emphasized. We have at the airport we have an extremely small footprint, about 3,500 acres, for a very large airport. And Dallas-Fort Worth, for instance, has 10,000. And we're surrounded by 3 different cities. L.A., Inglewood, El Segundo, and we have community issues all the time. We were always labeled the big bad airport, and everyone else, is the community. But they are our stakeholders, and we have to work with them and find a solution that we can all agree on. Okay, so decision making emphasized. How do we do it? What's the best way? How do we run a successful airport and still hear the community stakeholders as well? Okay, communication moves upward. Communication part is key here. People see field inspectors, people on the field, people in different divisions. We know what happens when you get in a silo effect. It's really important that that communication is crossed, the threshold of communication is created, so upper management knows what's going on and can prevent any type of situation that can bring risk or unintended consequences to the department. Good. Okay, let me talk about values. Ethics is underscored by values. When I say ethics, what do I mean? Well, we talk about values, and we talk about shared values. We have, I can have values. I might have values. I like oysters on a half shell and micro beer, right? So that might be my personal value. It's probably not a shared value by everyone, even though I may want it to be. But it's a value. But we want to look at shared values here, and because we're also talking about ethics, and I said it's not relativistic, right? So what are some shared values that we can all agree to? Well, part of that, as government workers, is already built into what we do. Okay, we're serving the public, so we have to have transparency, honesty, integrity, fairness, ensure that we are providing the same quality service to everyone, regardless of income, regardless of race, class, neighborhood they live in, accountability. So there are usually a subset of shared values that, and they're written in the LA Constitution the California Constitution as well. Okay. Okay, so well, I make sure everyone's still awake here. So we're going to see what kind of see if you use values or not. All right, so here's the question. Let's see if I can find the cursor here. Okay, do you refer to values or the law when making a decision? Oh, what? Okay. Number one, I aspire to truth, justice, and the American way. 2, it's a clear case of following the law. And 3, I use a good dose of both. Okay, and go ahead. So just pick 1, 2, or 3. It turns on, yeah, when the light turns on, it's working. Okay, so is I use a good dose of both on most complicated issues. Got cut off there. I guess I need to make this font smaller next time. Okay. Okay. For regulators, not many people just following the law here. That's a very impressive crowd here. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So the next thing about values, and let me ask, how many people are supervisors in the room? Okay, so you got about 40% supervisors. So one of the things that comes up with values is, well, okay, that's all fine and good. Yeah, okay, honesty, loyalty, blah, blah, blah. How do I put them into action? How do I put a value into place that I can say, hey, are we really being honest here? Okay, so there are expressions of taking a concept, a value, and turning it into an expression that's applicable to your daily workplace. These I borrowed from the Institute of Local Government, and they have this fantastic website. We actually worked with, used their stuff when we developed our own code of ethics. But they show how, hey, everything you do, answering the phones, inspecting gas stations, there's an element of excellence involved with that. And how do you express that? How do you express those specific tasks and responsibilities under a value? Okay, so this is some examples of that. Okay, ethical dilemmas. So I showed you some news prints from some other cases. Crane inspector accepting money, the entire government of Bell accepting money that wasn't theirs. Things like this that happen all the time. So what are these? Well, we come up with ethical dilemmas that are kind of in two different kinds. One is compliance-based. Okay, the law. Here's the law. It's a clearly written policy, and it's not being followed. Okay, so it's not being followed for what reason? Okay, I have personal interest. I have. I can see I can make some money because no one's watching where this contract is going. I can create a fake subcontractor and shuffle the money around. Okay, so sometimes it's intentionally not complying with the law. Other times it's a value conflict. You have two different values. You put a functional and an intrinsic one up here. It's environmentally sound, but it's way too expensive. Okay, which I'm sure you've heard a lot of. Okay. My supervisor tells me to do X, but to be truthful, I have to do Y. Okay, now I have a conflict. Which one do I choose? Okay. Part of choosing the right ethical action is being able to recognize these kind of ethical dilemmas. Okay. Okay, so some of the areas that we come across. I'll talk about conflict of interest in a second because there's both a functional definition as well as a conceptual definition. Gifts, meals, tickets. If clients offer you, 3-course meal, do you accept that? Are you able to accept that? And I don't think, how many people here have to file a Form 700 report with the state? Okay, so about half. Okay. Misuse, abuse of government positions, particularly if you have the power to penalize or to levy fines. There's a certain amount of power that goes along with that. How do you ensure that this is being done equitably? Okay. Nepotism in hiring or contract referrals, contracting process itself, evaluations, contract recommendations, health and safety issues. Okay. Conduct unbecoming a government employee. That's kind of a catch-all of when, someone's really a lout, and you can't really classify what they did, but they're just mean and selfish and just not a good, not a good worker. It's not conducive to the work environment. Falls under conduct unbecoming a government employee. Okay, conflicts of interest. When we talk about the ethical dilemmas, usually the compliance-based ones, a conflict of interest is often the main issue that comes up in these types of ethical issues. The Fair Political Practices Commission has its own definition of conflict of interest based on financial issues. But in practice and in concept, actually, there's an intention behind it. Is your intent to gain access to a vendor so that your husband can get hired by that firm? Is your intent here to gain access to a company that you can purchase some stock in because you're involved with the underpinnings of whether that company is going to get a contract or not? There are lots of gray zone areas that the conflict of interest concept can fall under. Okay, so we can use our little clickers again here. And can everyone, can you read that in the back? Do you want me to read the case? Yes, no? Okay, so we're planning the future here. Okay, Tommy has been an air pollution inspector with EPA for years and is about to retire with 25 years on the job. Recent budget fights have left her nervous about the future of her pension. Tommy has been in talks about a future job with one of the companies she inspects after she retires. Is this a problem? 1, no. She has one foot out the door and times are tight. She can separate her job duties from her personal life. Or 2, yes, she has a conflict of interest, and her financial interests are interfering or will be perceived to be interfering with her duties. Okay? And go. Okay, this is a very ethical group in here already. Okay. Okay, yes. And let me ask you this. What values do you think are at stake here? I mean, certainly to be, especially in this climate, where I think we've all, seen the budget fights and the accusations that government workers get pensions that they don't deserve, right? Is there a valid claim here of being concerned about your future employment, right? Yeah, I think you could probably make that case. Would it be okay if it was a company that she wasn't doing inspections for, right? So now you get into, is there really a conflict here, right? So the nature is that if she's inspecting this company, is she giving them a break on inspections? Or on the other flip side, is she grading them harder because she doesn't want to be perceived as giving them a break, which is also unfair to them, right? And then the element of perception, right? As we know, government doesn't always get a fair shake in the newspapers or in media. We get hit on what we don't do. We don't get praised for what we do on a daily basis. So we have to be aware of perception, more so than our corporate brothers and sisters, because we have to be aware of what the public thinks about us, about what they perceive us doing. Okay. Okay. Too cozy with a vendor. All right. A gas station in Bob's district continuously receives poor inspections on leaky nozzles. Bob recommends they upgrade their equipment to vendor I'm the right guy. The company makes the upgrade and sails through the next inspection. They send a thank you note to Bob and his boss, Barbara. Bob is called into Barbara's office the next morning. What could be her concern? Bob owns stock in vendor I'm the right guy. Vendor I'm the right guy is bidding for a contract and Bob is on the contract evaluation panel. The agency should not make singular recommendations as they would impair its objectivity. Any of the above. Okay. This is the groovy music. Okay, well, we have a split here. I know. Okay. Yeah. I know for some of our city agencies, we make recommendations for certain types of, I think I was talking to someone at lunch, our Bureau of Sanitation that does hazardous waste removal, some things that they don't do, they give a list of other qualified vendors. Okay, so that would be the appropriate way of doing it. They're qualified, here's a list. You recommend just one person, and what happens? You just raise, red flags go up. You know, is this their brother-in-law that they're recommending? You know, do they have investment in this group? And even in this case, if the vendor, you know, they thank him, but do they feel obliged to accept the recommendation? Or do they do it freely? And they may not say that, but because they've been getting failing scores, they may just feel obliged to go ahead with what the recommendation was. Okay? Again, undermining the public trust. Okay. A few pages back, we talked about ethical dilemmas. Some of them are brought on by ourselves, by having conflicts of interest. Some are brought on by our own environment that we work in. Especially in tight budgetary times, a lot of decisions get made about what budgets are valuable, which ones are going to be cut. And budgets are always about priorities, right? There's never a budget that's put in place that doesn't express priority of the agency manager or the elected officials. So some of the issues that can pressure us, elected officials, certainly policies, budget environments, political environments. Is it a voting season? What's the economy like? And of course our personal interests. Okay, so when we talk about pressure and we're talking about environment here, let's ask the next question. How often do you feel pressure to take an action contrary to your own judgment with regards to awarding a contract, administering a fine, or other role-related responsibility? Never, sometimes, often, or daily? Okay, that's very interesting. We always, because the state often has stricter regulations than city. City employees often, the Ethics Resource Center out in Washington, they did a survey on government, local government, state and local governments, and city work areas tend to be more unethical than state departments. Often because the states are implementing federal regulations, and they tend to be much more strict. Maybe state workers are more ethical. I'm not quite sure. So sometimes, so it's good that's not daily, although that's a sizable percent there, and often a daily marker there. Okay. And a follow-up: do you receive an explanation if you are pressured to make a choice that is not your own? Yes, and it's based on facts I did not have. Yes, and as far as I can see, it's based on politics. And no, I received no explanation. Okay. this precisely, but it's fine. Well, let me just find out, if there's test the temperature out here and see what it's like. So, yeah. So that answer actually tells me though that there's a lot of other stuff that goes beyond the regulations. A lot of this stuff that goes in between of how we enforce these things. Okay. Okay, this case study is going to be a value-based case study. There'll be two parts to it. So Supervisor Gene encourages Inspector Gene to dismiss the fine assessed to a manufacturing plant owner for a hazardous liquid disposal violation. Inspector Gene knows that the owner is a big donor to the county supervisor who oversees her department and suspects that the owner is receiving preferential treatment. What should she do? Do what her boss says, otherwise it'd be insubordination. Ask her boss what the reason is for the fine dismissal. Send an anonymous complaint to the Attorney General's office. That's another interesting response there. Okay. So I see we have no followers here. We're all leaders in this room here. There's no one's following just the instructions. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now I think number 2 would be the appropriate response. Then, if these are also. This is why we talk about ethics as being particular, situational. Because if this was the 5th time this occurred, you might say there's a pattern. And at that point, you might say, okay, we're going to send a call into the Attorney General's office. If it's the only time it occurred, and you generally have a supervisor that you trust and believe is very responsible, then yeah, you're going to ask the question, what gives here? Let's find out what gives. Okay. So what happens when our departments, our agencies get slammed in the press, or we are accused of some unethical actions? In the case with the woman who was getting ready to retire and wanted to get another job, it calls into mind that we're not trustworthy. We're not doing the public's good. We're not serving the interests of the public. And most specifically, the loss of confidence and the increased scrutiny. Because if the public, particularly certain stakeholders, feel that we are not doing what we have been obliged to do, we then get more regulations or more restrictions based on what we are supposed to be doing. Okay? And then in functionality terms, if you have to represent yourself or go down and talk to the electeds about what you did, you're using time, resources, money to go ahead and do that. All sorts of legal issues that can come up. You might get some financial implication by greater scrutiny over grants and other types of revenue-producing elements. Okay? Reputation is key, and maintaining your reputation is key not only to the agency's survival, but to the public trust and the perception of people believing that you're doing what is in their best interest. Okay, let's go back to Gene and Gene. Inspector Gene approached Supervisor Gene about his order to dismiss the fine. Seeing she was concerned, Supervisor Gene told her, "I know it seems like he's getting a break because of who he knows, but the county supervisor is coming down hard on high-asset clients that get fined thousands of dollars for cleaning up innocuous amounts of factory waste. She has threatened to cut our inspection budget. I just don't want to give her more ammunition for her crusade." Okay, was the supervisor right? Yes, because in these tight budget times, compromising is going to be necessary. Okay? And we can ask Governor Brown about that. Okay? Yes, management has an obligation to maintain the agency, which includes obeying the will of elected officials. I think I left a word out there. Maintain the agency is good, but okay. No, while there are negative consequences to the action, picking and choosing who gets a fine undermines the agency's integrity. Okay. Is that right? No one's voted for number 2? Is it? Okay. Yeah, I know. No, I know. I was really trying to think of questions that would kind of, get stump people a little bit here. Yeah, this is a very purist group here. Okay. Now, would it make a difference? Let me ask you this. Would it make a difference if the inspection budget was $5 million and it was a 10% cut to the agency's budget as a whole? Would it make a difference in anyone's answer? Okay. How many people do budgets here? Okay. All right. Good. Okay. All right. I could see people making an argument, though, for that. All right? And say, if we do it once, we don't get our whole budget taken away from this. And I'm going to say, well, the health of the agency is greater than this one time of deferring the fine. And there'll be an argument about that, right? So you might have an argument based on loyalty versus truth, short-term versus long-term, okay? Okay, so some decision-making tips and tools here. When there's a dilemma, when there's... Okay, I'll stop touching what I'm doing here. What kind of SOPs here can we throw out? First of all, just knowing what our policies and procedures are. A lot of disconnect comes because someone hasn't gone back to the manual or someone hasn't read the most recent rule. Know what some references are available. What values are involved. What are all alternative viewpoints and actions that could be taken? What consequences can come from the different actions you could take? And probably one of the most important things is communicate your concern. If you are faced with a dilemma, it may be between yourself and a supervisor, yourself and a coworker, or a personal issue that you're having. Communicate your concern to someone and document it. So it's on record as to why you did what you did. And there isn't some sort of perception that your action was nefariously based. Okay, so we go back to the public trust as government workers. Maintaining the public trust, keeping our commitments, knowing the rules, setting good examples of ethical behavior. Right? This is probably one more difficult things for some folks. They know the rules, they know what to do ethically in any sphere other than their own. Okay? They can tell you what the right thing to do is, on a certain policy issue, but as a person, they yell at their staff, or they cheat on their taxes, or they have personal ethical issues. And everyone sees this. And so when they give instructions or they say, that's not ethical to do, there are questions about this because you don't find that they themselves comport themselves in an ethical manner. Okay? So setting good examples of ethical behavior. Demonstrating transparency in decision-making. I would guess that a lot of your work here involves a heavy amount of scientific knowledge, okay, that the common Californian does not possess. Okay? I'm going to make that statement. I think it's pretty true. So you make these decisions on behalf of 35 million people. Okay? But if they don't understand what the decision is based on, and they will never, not everyone's going to have this kind of knowledge that exists in this room right now. How do you make it apparent as to how you made a decision? Okay? Communicating that decision making. Okay, and internal controls. A number of ethical issues come up because there wasn't a sufficient control system. The reason why we have payroll and personnel in two different places. So the personnel person is not changing the amount on the paychecks. If you have someone who's always the inspector for a certain area, are the inspector there all the time, or do you change the inspectors around? Okay. Having those kind of internal controls gives you a better sense of what's happening and maintains accountability through the department. Okay. And these have some websites and some fun books here for you. Okay. And that's about it. Any questions? Complaints? Ethical dilemmas? Okay.
Sorry. To me, some of these were easier to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it challenging when I was in a situation where someone said, is it okay to steal from the company? No. But is it okay to make copies for your children's homework on the copy machine at lunchtime when no one's looking? You know, sometimes I think those are the ethical issues.
Yeah.
It's interesting how do you battle with, like you said, the one, I was one who said, yes, the woman who's retiring, got her foot out the door. Retiring, okay. But, you know, I
Right.
think maybe she was favoring anybody, but I think when you're looking towards your retirement.
Yeah, it's a lot of things fall in the gray zone.
Right.
You know, and I asked how many people file, because if you don't file, you're not held to the same standards. But we ask our folks, our department, for everyone to follow the same standards, even though they're not required by law to. But there are common sense issues. You know, tax time. You know, I need to make a copy of my tax form. Am I going to wait till I get home and go to Kinko's to do that? No. You know, it's like making 3 pages of copies. You know, now it becomes a problem if you have 1,500 people under you in one copier, and everyone has to use the same copy machine. So, you know, that's where like some discretion comes in doing something that's reasonable, but it still answers the need of, hey, you know, look, I have people who have other issues going on that need to address this. You know, you need to call home, you need to pick up the kids. I mean, there are all sorts of things that go on that you come up with a policy that is both fair and transparent and defendable. And a lot of these kinds of little office issues that come up, they're often best answered by having the employees themselves give some input on, okay, we need a social media policy. You know, is it okay to be on Facebook? Well, there'll be this group, no, everyone's going to spend their time on Facebook and not be doing their work. Well, that was the same argument when the internet was became available to the computers as well. So what's a policy that's going to be fair to everyone but still maintain the workplace? You know, and that's why it requires some input. You know, because if you just by fiat say no, you know, there's a sense of unfairness that goes along with that. Yeah. Yeah.
Question or whatever, this may be more gray area, but I work for a city, and when we go through a sort of plan check process, everybody has to go through, we get their plans, and we have a 2-year turnaround. And occasionally when it's a big developer or a big project, you know, the economic development director's calling me, or this person's calling me, hey, can you get those plans fast tracked? We want to get, you know, we want to move them along through the process as fast as possible. Not switching our, maybe not, you know, taking up for dinner or anything, unfortunately, but obvious that this entity, outwardly, is getting a lot more attention and a lot more assistance to
Right.
these processes than Joe Schmo who doesn't know, you know, what to do and how to do it. So I mean, I guess some of the sophistication of that, but on the other side, I think is, and again, understandably, if the city, they tax revenue, they can do this and that, but that to me is always sort of something in my mind, particularly because we just rehearsed training, you know, sitting across from the economic development person. You know,
Yeah. Well, and I would bet that they would justify it by, well, this group will bring in much more revenue, and therefore it's much more important that we do this. And so there you have competing values. You know, well, the city needs this money to keep all these other programs running, and you have a fairness and a question of, well, yes, but aren't they a citizen like everyone else, and shouldn't they get in line like everyone else? You know, so I mean that's becomes a classic case. I mean, you know, LA, there's an expedited program for some planning issues that you pay for this, and then you do, because you pay for it, get faster service. I think you can argue there are ethical issues with that too, you know, because who's able to pay for it? You know, yeah, that's one of your classic value-based dilemmas. You know. This is a dilemma-free group here. So it's, okay. Okay, thanks.